Okay. So, video game console generations tier list. They have just a handful of consoles here. So, like, what is this? I'm looking at... Okay, they have the Atari 2600. Sure, we can use that as a generation. The NES, sure. The Genesis, we're not going to talk about the SNES, fine. Okay, there's the Odyssey, sure, that goes like before the Atari. The PlayStation, Genesis, PlayStation, Xbox 360, PS4. Okay, so they use one console for each generation. A little biased here. Like, I wouldn't have picked the Sega Genesis over the Super Nintendo, but hey, that's just me. All right, so here, let's go rank. For me, it's just like, hold on. The amount of Japanese titles that have been given a second chance on PS4 has been crazy. The PS4 pretty much resurrected the Yakuza series over here. And that is something that I will have to take you at face value because I don't play the Yakuza series at all. And I will say, yeah, Japan, though, has had a bit stronger of a run here, like Resident Evil and stuff. But again, yeah, the games there weren't really for me. All right. So I think there are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, we can actually do a generational tier list here. And we can use like each individual console to... Actually, no, we can't. What is the Switch? The Switch, like... I argue that it is technically next gen, but no, yeah, we can't actually do it. There are still lots of good games this gen, but overall volume of cool stuff seems way lower. Agreed. All right, I'm going to try and make the console generation tier list. Actually, let's flip my screen over here away from Stardew, and let's play some music too. This is not... Okay, we're going to put Stardew over here. Let's go play some beats while we go. And Switch is there separate. That's a weird thing. I'd argue that... Okay, here's another thing. Console generations, I think, are defined by the time they are released. And therefore, I think when we talk about like the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, the Switch would be the start of the 9th generation of consoles. No one's going to listen to me on that, though. I saw the big argument they had on Wikipedia determining where the Switch goes, and they called it 8th gen because it's not as powerful as the other two, but I think power is irrelevant. Can you rename the tier categories? Letters only is just dirty. S, A, B, F. I mean, S tier, A, B, like... Here, F and nope. Sure. Can I... B, C, D. I don't know if there's any fail here. And okay, and there's also some other things, right? Like, we have to look at it. Are we gonna rank these based on like how they rank now or at the time? Because I would say, if I'm looking at, like, I would give, say, the Atari generation more of a bump for historical prevalence. But if you try to play a lot of those games now, they're bad. They're really bad. I wonder if this is going to end up just being me putting them in, like, the order that they... All right, here we go. Now, retrospective. Okay, we can do that. All right. Is this going to be a controversial opinion? I think the first gen, if we're counting like the Magnavox Odyssey, everything before the Atari 2600, that's bottom tier. Those games are basically not playable, and they have the most poorest facsimile of graphics and gameplay. Most of that stuff is a mess, and you just don't want to play it now. Significant, yes, absolutely. I think it's going to be at the bottom. NES and older games for the most part are air now. I would argue that we'll get to those. All right, we're gonna go in like chronological order here. We're gonna ignore the Switch in this particular case. We're gonna lump that with PS4. How do I burn this right now? Okay, we're doing this right now. I think just to help give me context for how I want to frame this, I think the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis era of consoles is S tier. When we look back at those library of games, the storylines that happened between the two platform makers, Sega and Genesis, our first super heated console war. Both platforms made amazing games that still hold up today. And a lot of, like, even now, like, modern indie, a lot of modern games borrow so many concepts from platforms and graphics that were established in this era. I think Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, S tier, easy. So we've established the top, established the bottom. Where does the Atari 2600 go? I think it's better than the Odyssey. Some of that stuff is cool, but if you've seen those games of late, like, they're rough. I'm gonna have to go with C, the next tier up. And some of that's great. I have the Atari collection on the Switch, and some of that stuff is really cool. I like a lot of the arcade games there, like Missile Command, Centipede. Berserk is one of my all-time favorite. Combat was really cool, but yeah, a lot of that stuff just doesn't hold up. It's just a little too rudimentary, and yeah, okay. I think I've explained. It's a little rough. NES. Ooh, this is man. I think I'm going A. Oh, it's somewhere between A and B. For now, I'm leaning towards A tier. And when we think about the 8-bit and your Super Marios, like everything with the NES, a lot of the biggest Nintendo franchises were born out of this era. Your Super Marios, your Metroids, your Zeldas, your Mega Mans, like a lot of the big third-party franchises all born out of this era. I don't put it at S though, because I don't think large portions of that catalog hold up. There are a ton of bad games. I know a lot of people romanticize the 8-bit era because we've kept those graphics alive pretty much in like ever since, but there's a lot of bad games there. And I think the music's great. I think considering the limitations, they did incredible stuff, but I don't think it's as good as the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis era of games. That green dude says it's a B. Cowface also gives it a B, but that's me. It's tricky to weigh the value of trailblazing versus improvement. Absolutely fair. And I'm trying to juggle my best between both. PlayStation 1. Okay, here's an interesting one. Oh, wait. This is tough. Because now God tier? I'd say no. I think there's probably a case for it being S tier. But at the same time, a lot of those games graphically and mechanically have aged incredibly poorly. Even some of the greatest games of that era, like you try and play GoldenEye now and that game is garbage. Yes, Metal Gear. Okay, there's a lot of cool stuff in Metal Gear 2. But again, like, I think of the generations, considering how new the PS1 and N64 is, I think it's aged really bad. I'm gonna be a tentative B, and I could flip-flop these. I think one could also argue that because this was largely just the NES, this had the PlayStation, it had the Nintendo 64, it had the Saturn. This also had like Super Mario 64 in here as well, your Final Fantasy, Metal Gear. Alright, I'm flip-flopping them. I'm gonna put PlayStation, N64, Sega Saturn era A tier, NES B tier. I might flip that back. We'll see. PS2, Xbox, See, this is where PS2, Xbox, GameCube. Again, oh man, this was such a killer generation, and I missed the entirety of PS2, Xbox. Advent of online, the PlayStation 2, the best-selling home console of all time. I think there's absolutely, yeah, I think you could argue PlayStation 2 in itself would carry this to S tier. I don't know if I could do that. I think I would bump it definitely above PS1 and 64. For me personally, I think it's a step short of S. Like a step, like very close. And it might end up in S. You also missed PS2, Xbox completely, had a GameCube. I love my GameCube. This was great. Oh man, the NES feels weird at B. All right, you're gonna, don't at me at this. PS3, Xbox 360, Wii era. That's an S tier. Well, again, like the points I've stated. Xbox had amazing library of games. PS3 also amazing library of games. The Wii, it pioneered motion controls and it sold really well and it opened up the audience. And like, yeah, I don't necessarily like motion controls, but I'm not going to knock the innovation that it brought to the gaming space in multiple ways, widening the audience, motion controls, all that. Making Xbox and the innovations in particular with online play and online accounts, friends list, all that stuff all happened right here. Indie games really took off in this era as well, and I'd almost put it here, but I'm not quite ready to do that. But I think it is definitely S tier. And when the Wii was really cool when it first came out, absolutely. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, getting the Wii on launch day, waggling my arm around, playing tennis. Oh, I thought it was the best. And then as time went on, we realized that like, oh, there's a lot of things this thing can't do, and that's kind of problematic. 360 is S tier. Yep. If we're talking individual consoles, 360 is an S tier console. It is my top 2 of all time. And the PS4. See, this is where I think it's a B. I think it's a B. This, I think there are definitely some amazing games that came out during this time, and you have to include stuff like Fortnite as well, and the advent of these large multiplayer games, and we can't discount that. But as a whole, I feel like a lot of the games of this era were derivative of the stuff from the previous generation. They were slightly prettier, with a lot more gross microtransactions and stuff like that, and a lot of the big franchises that were born in the 360 era got completely worn out by the time we got to the PS4, and there wasn't as much innovation to keep that thing going. And yes, those consoles both sold incredibly well, but it's I don't think it holds up as well. I think where one could make the argument that it's higher is if you include the Nintendo Switch as part of this generation. If you do, then you're talking about the I didn't mean to put that here. Then we're talking about like the advent of this device that is portable and a home console at the same time, that docks, that's just super convenient, has all these games on it. That I could argue then bumping PS4 Switch up to A tier. But if you don't count it, I guess if you do, then it might make it to A tier, but like the bottom of A tier. So yeah, that is, looking at this now, I have more or less how I would rank the generations. Cowface says, main thing PS4 improved was the network services, but with that came microtransactions like crazy. PSN did improve. I will give them that. But it was also like, oh, you made it about as good as Xbox Live, in which, you know, Microsoft did a generation ago. Jenna says, trapped in a room with one console, what do you choose? Ah, that's an interesting question. And Cowface says, oh, and Nintendo doesn't count in terms of that. Theirs are still bad. Yes, their online still sucks. If I had to be stuck in a room with one console, do I get internet access? That will change my stance. If I get internet, I would take the Xbox 360. If I don't get internet, it would be... oh, it might also still be the Xbox 360. That or the Super Nintendo. I also think that the generation's not quite over yet, and I feel like when the Nintendo Switch is all said and done, that very well could be my all-time favorite console. PS3 Online wasn't bad, and it was free. It was free, but it wasn't as good as Xbox Live. Was Xbox Live that much dollar value better than PSN? Probably not. Was it better though? Yeah, absolutely. All right. Are there any, like, I see that some other things. Yeah, I see that green dude says A tier for the PS4 era. Okay, that's fair. Are there any major objections here on this list? And I get, like, I've seen a couple things like, oh, you can move this up one, down one, but I don't see anyone being like, oh my god, you put the Odyssey as like D tier? No way, it should be number one. No. Navigating the PS Store on PS3 was slow and a chore. Love the console, but it's online. Oof, yeah, it was pretty bad. I was pretty late to the PS3, TBH. I got one like 2 years before it was like 2010. And I got it on sale at a convention, and I bought it with, I think it was Uncharted, and I think I might have gotten God of War as well. But yeah, those two games are, well, God of War was great, and I know it was just like an up-res port. Uncharted was just okay. Uncharted 2 is much better though. Yeah, I think that's it. There it is, the definitive console generation tier list. I really hope next gen, whatever the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X, Google Stadia. Okay, yeah, okay, we'll forget about that. I thought there could have been a world where, seriously, Google Stadia would have been a real problem, and it ended up not being the case.